Okay, so recording is started. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, so let me know once my screen is visible to all of you. Okay, so it's visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Right. So in previous session, what we have learned like how to create the abstract class, right? So mainly we focus like in abstract class is the class that is created with the keyword abstract. Okay, that will be created with the keyword abstract, and that particular class is having some methods are abstract and some methods are non-abstract. That means normal our instance method are there, right? And then it is not possible to create the object of that particular abstract class, and we can declare we can declare the constructor inside the abstract class. Okay, then we have seen like how to call that particular constructor if you're having some let's say child class for that particular class. Through the child class we can access this particular constructor. So that particular part we have seen, I guess, right? Apart from that, we have seen like how to use or when to use this particular abstract class, right? So if you are having some requirement and you are having implementation details of that requirement as well, right? But those implementations are in partial phase, right? So in that case we should go with the abstract class, right? So apart from that, what we learn, um abstract class needs to extend some other class. Okay, and the class who is extending that particular abstract class, that class needs to implements all the unimplemented method. Unimplemented method means abstract method, all the abstract method that class needs to implement. So here is the example. So this is not our project. Yeah, this one, right? So in abstraction, we have seen this particular example, right? So this is our abstract class, right? Yeah, this particular class is abstract class, and in that class, we have created one non-abstract method. This one is the abstract method. Okay, so abstract method means a method without body, right? And we have some non-abstract method as well, right? Right. Now, what I'm saying, like if you are having some abstract class, there might be chances you are having, some abstract method as well, and it's not mandatory you should have abstract method. Okay, so without abstract method as well, I can have the class, right? Abstract class. Okay. But if you are having some abstract method inside the abstract class, then compulsory you have to provide the implementation of those unimplemented method. So here in this case, these two methods are unimplemented, right? So what you need to do whenever you are extending this particular class, right? So for example, this user class I'm extending with the new user, right? So new user class is need to this particular class need to compulsory provide the implementation of this two unimplemented method, edit user, view user. So if you see in edit user, view user, we are providing the implementation of these two methods. Okay, so this is how abstract class work, right? So similar to abstract class, we have one more concept, that is the interface. Okay, so now what is interface? Okay, so first of all, try to understand the interface theory. Then we will go through some practical example. All right. So what is the interface? So interface is the class-like structure in which all the methods are by default public and abstract. Okay. So first point is interface is similar. It looks like a class. All right, but it's not a class. Okay. So we can say the class like a structure. Okay, in which all the methods, I'm saying not some methods. Okay, so all the methods are by default public and abstract. Now what is mean by abstract? What is mean by abstract? If I'm saying method is abstract, what it means? Digambar, Rohi, if I'm saying my method is abstract, right? So what exactly it means? Method is abstract method. Can you hear me?
Hello, hello.
Yeah, yeah.
Abstract method is nothing but we can say it is we can say it is requirement and it is ready to implement. We can say
Okay, okay.
uh,
But I mean, in simple terms, what we can say, abstract method is what
simple
kind of
term is
method?
that like it's like a data hiding. We can say
Okay,
uh, we can
A
say
method without
method is
body.
yeah.
okay. Yeah, so someone is saying like, method without body, right?
Yeah.
So don't go in that, method hiding and all that complex topic. No need to go, right? Simply say abstract method is the method which is method without body. That's it. Okay, someone ask you what is mean by abstract method. So you have to say method without body. Okay, so abstract method is the method without body. That's it. Right.
Yes.
So whenever we see the abstract any method as abstract method, so that method will not have any body. All right. So what I'm saying about the interface. So interface is the class like a structure. Interface is the class like a structure in which all the method is by default public and abstract. All the methods are by default public and abstract. All right. So two things that we have to follow if you are creating any method. So by default, that particular method is the public and that method is the abstract as well. All right. So this is the point number
Hello.
one. Yeah.
Sorry, sir. Due to some system glitch, I just restarted my
Sorry.
system. So unable to join. I joined just before.
Mm-hmm.
So I just skip some of the part. I mean,
Okay. So we
this
have
one.
just started. Okay. It's not like I mean we have started with the new concept that is the interface. Right. So
Okay, sir.
yeah, we have just started.
Thank you.
Okay. So far we just covered the first point number one. Okay. So point number one is saying that if you are creating the interface, in that interface, if you are creating any method, so that particular method is by default public and abstract. By default public and abstract. That means all the methods are abstract method. Right. So every method is without body. Each and every method will be without body. All right. Now then the class which is implementing the interface, that class needs to provide the implementation. Okay, so now if you see any interface, okay, so for example I'm creating the interface A, right? So that interface needs to implement someone, needs to implement, I'm saying implement, not saying extend, right? So implement and extend is two different things, right? But see, if you're I mean if you want to do the inheritance, right? So for example how we do the inheritance, so for example I'm having, let's say, class class A. Okay, so for example this is my class A, right? And then I want to create one child class, right? So how I'm going to say, so for example this particular A class I want some child class, right? So in that case, how I'm going to do it? Class, let's say B, and then I will say extends, right? Extends keyword is there, and then I will say A, right? So this will make my class B is the child class of A. So this is how we can achieve the inheritance here, right? So this particular step, I will say I am extending class A. So class B is extending class B. Okay, class A is extending class B. But if I'm having now interface, right? Interface, and for this interface A, for example, I want to make one child class. For this interface, if I want to make one child class, then what I need to do? I need to say class, let's say B. Implements, I have to say implements A. That means I'm making this particular class A as a parent class of class B. Sorry, so this particular class interface A, I'm making the parent of class B. So here is one class available. For that class, I'm making one parent interface. Parent interface. So always remember here we are not going to say extend. Here we are going to say implements. What we are going to say implements. Okay. So now what this particular statement is saying, second statement is saying the class, okay, so the class which is implementing. So if you see, so class B is implementing whom? A. Okay. So in that case, what we are saying, if class is implementing the interface, that class needs to provide the implementation of all the method. So for example, in interface, what I said, all the methods are by default what? Abstract method. So no need to provide the body. So for example, M1 and M2 methods are there. Okay, so these two methods are there. Okay, so what I'm saying, sorry, it should be in interface. We're talking about the interface, right? So in interface, I will add the two methods, right? So this is the interface, right? So if it is interface, then all the methods are by default abstract method. No need to say abstract as well, right? So those are by default abstract, right? So these methods are by default abstract. So that's the reason I'm not going to provide the body of this particular methods, right? So now these methods are abstract, but if some class is implementing that particular interface. So here, if you can say class B is implementing the interface A. So class B is implementing the interface A. Class B is implementing the interface A, right? So in that case, what will happen? This particular class B needs to provide the body of all the unimplemented method. So here, which are the unimplemented method? So M is the unimplemented method and M2 is the unimplemented method. So what I need to do? I need to provide the body of all this method, and this is compulsory. If I'm not providing, it will give the error. Okay, so I have to provide the body of this. Body of this means I have to write the some code for these methods, right? Then this particular method. Okay, okay, this particular method, right? So here, what I need to do? I need to provide the body of this particular two method, and then only this error will go on. Otherwise, error will be stay there, right? So I have to provide the body of all the unimplemented method. Okay, it's compulsory. If you are implementing any interface, then you have to implement method. Body of all the methods, right? So this is the point number two. Point number two. Okay, so point number one is the all the methods are by default abstract method, and point number two, if any class is implementing interface, okay, then that class has to provide the implementation of all the unimplemented method, right? So point number three is what saying? Point number three is saying every variable inside interface. So in interface, suppose I'm having some variable, so that particular variable is by default public, static, and final. And final. Along with, you have to initialize that particular variable. So what is mean by initialization? What is meant by
Assigning the
initialization?
value.
Assigning the value, right? So previously we have seen, like, we are not assigning the value to the variable, right? So we are keeping those variable as a blank, right? And in that case we have seen, like, for the each and every data type, there are some default values are there, right? So in that case we are keeping the variable as a uninitialized, right? And that's fine. But if you are in interface, right? So in interface you have to compulsory initialize, that means assign the value for the variable, otherwise your compiler will shout, it will give the error. Okay, so this is the point number 3. Okay, point number 4, it is not possible to declare the constructor inside the interface. So inside the interface you cannot create the constructor. Okay, and as well, for the interface you cannot create the object, so it is not possible to create the object. Not possible to create object. Okay, for the interface we will not create the object. It is not possible to create the object of interface, right? So these are the few points that you have to keep in mind when you are working on interface, or most of the interview questions as well, it will be came from this particular point only. Okay, so they will first of all ask you what is meant by interface. So you have to tell that it's class like structure, and by default all the methods in the interface are abstract method. Okay, public and abstract method. Okay, so the class which is implementing the interface, that class needs to provide the implementation of all the unimplemented method, right? So this is the point number 2. Right. So point number 3 is saying, in interface, if you are having some variables, right? So those variables are by default public, static, and final. Public, static, and final. Those variables are by default public, static, and final. Okay, and must be initialized at the time of declaration. Okay, so whenever declaring the variable, at that time you have to initialize the value. So this is the point number 3. Right. So point number 4, it is not possible to create the constructor inside the interface. And point number, so these 2 points you can skip. Okay, skip means whenever someone is asking what is the interface, you have to tell these 3 points. You have to tell these 3 points. Okay, and these 2 points you have to, remember, right? So sometimes, interview will ask, it is possible to create the constructor inside the interface. So answer is no. It is possible to create the object of interface. Answer is no. All right. So these 4 points is important. Okay. Now Java 8 onwards, there are some, special functionalities added inside the interface. Okay. So that particular things we'll discuss later. Okay. So first of all, concentrate on how to create the interface. All right. So for example, let's take one simple example, and then we'll go for the one real time example. Okay. So for example here, right. So for example here, so let's say I'm having, let's say, one interface. So how to create the interface? Simple. You have to right click here. Okay. And you have to just say what? You have to just say create interface. Okay. So this is the interface. So this is the, if you see this blue symbol, all right. So this is the interface symbol. So C is the class symbol. So see this green C symbol is the class symbol. All right. So just remember these 2 symbols. It will be help you a lot. Okay. I will tell you how and where. Okay. So this is the interface symbol, and how to create the interface. So just click here. Okay. And then give the name. So for example, for the instance, I'm saying, like, I'm having one interface A. Okay. So I'm having one interface A. So this is the interface created. So how it is creating? So here it's giving the public. Okay. If you don't want to public, you can remove it. Okay. And that is absolutely fine. Right. Then interface is the keyword. Okay, so like we have, while creating the class, we are saying the class A, right? So similarly, while creating the interface, you have to say interface A, interface A, right? And this is the body of interface, right? From this curly braces, so to this curly braces. So this is the body of interface. Okay, so now in this particular 2 curly braces, you are going to have your code, whatever methods or whatever variables you want to create, that you are going to create. Okay, so what is the first point of interface? In interface, okay, in interface, all the methods are by default public and abstract. Okay, so let's try it. Okay, so what we will do, we'll create one interface. We have created one interface, and let's say I'm going to take one method. Okay, so I will say void m. Okay, void m is my method. Okay, and now if you see, it's not allowing me. It's not allowing me to what? Or it's not giving me any error. So see, if I'm having one class, okay, so for example, I'm creating the here, let's say one class, okay, and I'm giving the name of this particular class as a test, right? So this is my test class, okay, and now in this particular test class, if I'm having some method, okay, so I'm saying like, this is method m, right? So I will say void m, right? So immediately it's giving me error. If I'm not providing body for this particular method, or if I'm not having any body for this particular method, it's immediately giving me error. What error it's giving? The method required the body instead of the semicolon. So it's saying like, you have given here semicolon, but actually here it should be have body for this particular method like this. Okay, then this particular error will go, right? But in case of interface, see, I'm not providing the body for this particular method, but still it's not giving me any error. Okay, so which kind of method will not having body? So we have seen earlier, right? At the when we are learning the abstract class, right? So we have seen in abstract class there might be some abstract method as well. There might be some abstract method as well, right? So for abstract method we have seen earlier, if you are not providing body for the abstract method, then that case as well it's fine. Okay, for abstract method you don't have to provide the body, right? So if you see here, this is the normal method, but still it's not giving me error if I'm not providing body. Why? Because this particular method is by default abstract method, whether you provide or whether you give or not give. All right. So Java by default add this particular interface method. If you're having method inside the interface, that particular method is by default abstract method. So this particular method is by default abstract. If you're saying like abstract, right? So in that case as well it's fine. So I will say abstract, right? So it is absolutely fine. Okay, but this no need to provide this particular keyword. By why? Because see, Java is by default taking this method as abstract method. If you are providing, that is okay, but it's not required. Okay, so I will just remove it. Okay, so this is the first method. Okay, so second method I want to create what? Okay, so second method will be the m2 method. Okay, so second method is the m2 method is there. Right, so this particular method is the m2 method. Okay, so this is also abstract method. So see, whenever I'm creating method here, I don't need to provide the body for that particular method. Why? Because all the methods are by default abstract here. Right, so that is fine. Okay, so this is the let's say point number one. So point number one is the all the methods are public and abstract. Okay, so public, how it is public we'll see later. Okay, but by default these methods are public. Right, then how what we are saying, if your any class is implementing that particular interface, then that particular class provide the implementation of all the unimplemented method. Okay, so if any class is implementing your interface, right? So then that class provide the body for unimplemented method. Body for unimplemented method. So here in this case, how many unimplemented methods are there? Two unimplemented methods are there, right? So for example, I'm having, let's say, this particular test class. Okay, or maybe I will create the new class. Let's say class name is B. So I'll say class name B here. Okay, class B I have created, and I'll just say finish. Right. So this particular class is the B class. Right. So now if I'm saying this particular class is the child class of interface A. So how I have to say, if I say like extend. and let's say I say A. Right, so it will give the error. What error it will give? It will say like, A cannot be superclass of B. A cannot be superclass of B. Why? A class must be, sorry, A superclass must be a class. Okay, so it's saying like this A must be the class. This is not a class. This is not a class. Right. So this should be the class. This should be the class. In this case, this is the interface. If you see, this is the interface. Right. So this particular extend keyword should not be used there. Remember, this is very important. Okay. So if you are having one class and you want to make our interface as a parent interface for that particular class, so you have to say implements here. Here you have to say implements. Remember this particular keyword implements. Okay, so for class and interface, you are using implements keyword. For the class and interface, you are going to use the implements. Right. So I will say here, so let's say implements A. Class B implements A. Okay. So now I am getting immediately error. See, read the error carefully. Okay, so what error it's giving? It's saying like, there are two methods available. So if you see, it's saying the unimplemented inherited abstract method. Okay, so it's saying like type, the type B must be implement inherited abstract method A dot M and A dot M2. So it's saying like, there are two methods which is unimplemented method. So you have to provide the implementation of these two methods. You have to provide the implementation of these two unimplemented method. Okay, so how to provide the description? So one can say like, here he can hover the mouse and he say like, add the unimplemented method. This is the shortcut. Okay, how you have to say? So just hover the mouse on B and say add unimplemented method. Okay, so immediately it will add the unimplemented method. See, you have to write the code here. You have to write the code here. Now you must be wonder about this at the rate override. At the rate override. So what is this at the rate override? Right. So at the rate override is the annotations available in Java. Annotations available is in Java. This is just to denote we are doing the overriding. So previously as well, we have done the overriding. Right. So let me go to the overriding folder. Okay. So here, if you see, we are doing the overriding. So for this, yeah, so for this particular print method, so see, print data method in parent class and print data method in child class. So what we are doing exactly here, both are having integer parameter and green triangle is there. So that means we are doing the overriding. Okay, but see, tomorrow someone different person will came, so he will face little bit difficulty, right, to understand actually we are doing the overriding here, right? So he might be using, let's say, Notepad to see this particular file, right? So in that case, this green triangle will not see there, right? Currently, we are looking from the, let's say, Eclipse, right? So that's the reason Eclipse is showing this particular green triangle. But he has to look very carefully, then he will notice this particular green triangle, right? So instead of that, I could say like, I'm doing at the rate override. Okay, at the rate override. So this is to denote we are doing the overriding. So this is for the only, I mean annotations that will denote, okay, that we are doing the override. Only that is the purpose of this particular. Okay, if you are not giving, that is completely fine. If you are giving, so tomorrow some third person will came. So he will, by looking at the code, he will just notice that this particular method you are doing the overriding. Right. So this is just for understanding purpose. Right, so it's not having any functional impact. Right, so similarly here as well, this particular overriding is coming. So now you will say like, where we are doing the overriding. We are doing here overriding, yes or no?
Yes,
Now
Ajit.
see, we are having this
Done.
particular interface, and for this particular interface, we are making the parent interface of the child class B. So B is the child class and A is the parent interface, right? So one method, so for example, this particular M method is available in parent, and for the same method, we are providing the implementation. Okay, so actually we are overriding this particular method. Okay, so for this M method in parent and child having same, exactly same what? Signature. Signature means public, void, main. Okay, here as well. So you will say like, how this is public. So we have seen like, at that time we can increase the scope, we cannot reduce the scope. Previous session we have seen, right? So here I am increasing the scope, right? So increasing scope is fine. Okay, from default, so I am saying public, so that is fine, right? Or I could say like this as well. Okay, so it's saying like cannot reduce the scope because see, oh, here this particular method, what I said about this particular method, it is by default abstract and public, whether I'm giving or not giving. So this method is by default public. This method is by default public method. So this is the point number one that we have seen, right? So by default, what it is saying, all the interface method is by default public and abstract, public and abstract. So now how we prove that particular, this method is public. So in class, suppose I'm saying like, here it's look like a default method. Type is the default, right? So if I'm making here default, that means I'm removing the public. Then it's saying cannot reduce the scope. That means this particular access here, it's not a public access. Sorry, it's not a default access. It's a public. By default, it's look like public abstract. So this is how this method internally looks. Okay. JVM add this particular two keywords by default. If you're adding or not adding, that's particular fine. So now I am saying like, now you can say,
The
okay, now you
default
can
is
say,
also a access specifier. So how can we differentiate the methods, public or default?
right. So for interface, you have to remember this particular point. So all the methods are by default public. Okay. So that's the reason I have mentioned here. This is, you have to remember. Okay. By default, methods are public. So if you are taking class, then that funda will apply. Like, if you are not providing any access modifier, that is the default access modifier. If you are providing public, so that method is public in case of class. But in case of interface, by default method is the public. So if you see like this particular method like this will be a public method. So if you see method like this will be a public method. If you are saying like, method like this will be the public method. Okay. So if you see like, protected. Okay. So it will give the error. Okay. So other access specifier is not allowed here. Okay. So you cannot say this particular method is a protected. You cannot say this particular method is a private. You cannot say this particular method as a default. Only public is allowed here. Other access modifier, it will give the error. Okay. So that's the reason our point number one is saying all the methods inside the interface are by default public and abstract. All the method in interface is by default public and abstract. Right. So this is the point number one. Now in point number two, we have seen like, if any class is implementing that particular interface, then he has to provide what? Body of unimplemented method, or he has to implement. You can say that he has to implement that unimplemented method. He has to implement those unimplemented method. Okay, now what's error? Cannot be reduced the scope. Okay, so I have to say here public. Okay, then this error will be go. Right. Now, for example, I'm passing some messages here, right? So I will say this is method M. sorry, and I'll say this is method, this is method, so let's say M2, right? So this is how I can provide the body of this particular uh, interface method. Okay, suppose for example in this B class, if you want to add some more method, you can add it. Okay, but I'm not going to add the more methods, so that you know, right? So any class you can have n number of method. So this is the simple class, and in that case you can have n number of method. There is no restrictions, right? So in interface, what error we are getting? So let's save it. Okay, so now if you see, we have one interface, and for that interface we have one child class, that is the class B. Okay, and in that particular class B, we have implemented all the unimplemented methods. So this is the first unimplemented method from the interface. This is the second unimplemented method for the interface, and we have provided the implementation of both the methods. We have provided the implementation of both the methods. Right. So this is the core concept of, I mean, this is only, this is regarding the method. Okay. So that interface method, you have to follow these two rules. Okay. Now third rule is talking about the interface variable. Okay. So what it is saying, interface variable is by default what? Public, static, and
Final.
final. Public, static, and final. So, okay. So let's say I'm saying like, this is int a. Okay. Int a is equal to, sorry, I have to mention it in interface. This is class, right? So if I'm having, let's say this particular interface, right? So I will say here int a is equal to, let's say, or maybe I will say like, int a like this, int a. So this is the variable, right? So this is how we can declare the variable. This is how we can declare the variable. But see, for the declaration, I'm getting one error. What error I'm getting? So it's saying blank field may not be have initialized. Okay, so it's saying like, this particular variable is not initialized. This particular variable is not initialized. Okay, so what I need to do? I need to initialize this particular variable. I need to initialize this particular variable. Then and then only error will go. Then and then only error will go. All right. Apart from this particular variable internally looks like this. Public, static, and what? Final.
Final.
Fine.
Public, static, and final. So this particular variable internally looks like this. Okay. Now see, I can prove it is a static variable. So how I can prove that it is static variable? I can prove. Right. So for example, this is the test class here. Right. So this is the test class, and for example, in test class, I'm having em method available. Right. So for example, I want to access, this particular variable. This particular variable. Okay. So what is this? How I can access the static variable? By using class name, it is possible.
Class name
Yes,
dot
by
variable.
class
Yeah,
name.
right. So this is the interface name. So let's access it with the help of interface name. Right. So what I will say here, I'll say here test. Okay. Inside the M, I will say a dot a. And if you see, I'm able to access this particular a variable. Right. So I'm getting some error here. Complete the variable declaration. So
Ajay, can we
syntax.
hello?
Yeah.
Can we create object for the same?
Interface.
Yeah.
Interface object creation is not possible. Interface object creation is not possible. Okay. So
Okay.
for example,
Okay.
with the help of a dot a, I can access it. Okay, but it's not allowing me, getting some error. I'll tell you why. So I'll say
Yes.
a dot a. Okay. Still error. Cannot resolve, or cannot resolve. Not a field. So okay. But see, for the accessing, I'm able to access it right directly, right? So that means this particular variable is the static variable. This particular variable is the static variable. So by default, this is the static variable. So what we learn about the static? Static we can access with the help of class name. So here class name is, you can consider the interface name. So with the help of interface name, I can able to access it, that particular variable. Right. Now what is this final? What is this final? What is meant by final? Right. So final, we are going to cover uh, in upcoming session. Okay, if you see, we have final topic here. All right. But for here, we are using final and what exactly it means. All right. So for the variable, if you see any final, all right. So in front of any variable, if you see final, what it means? It means you cannot modify the value of this particular variable. It is not allowed to modify the value of this particular variable. Okay. So tomorrow, if I say like, let's say a is equal to, let's say 20. Okay. So here I am modifying the value, right? So it will not allow me, right? To modifying the value is not allowed here, right? So for example, in case of B, if I say like, here, if I say like, a is equal to a, or maybe a is equal to 20. Okay, so it's not allowing me here. It's not allowing me to modify. What error I'm getting here? Okay, it's saying like, final a dot a cannot be assigned. A dot a cannot be assigned. So you have assigned value. You have initialized once. You have initialized this particular value once. Now you are not allowed to initialize the value. What you have initialized, which is final. Okay, so whenever you see any final variable, what it means, you are not allowed to change that particular value. So this is the final concept. This is not related to interface. Okay, so if you see, I mean, in interface variables are final. Okay, but final is having their own meaning. Final is having their own meaning. Like static is having their own meaning. What is mean by static variable? What is mean by static variable? What is difference between static and instance variable? Remember, guys, static variable and instance
Statics
variable.
we
What is the
can
difference?
call with the help of the class name,
Okay.
and
What is
Static
instance
major
is
difference?
within the class and outside the method.
Hmm.
static have
Instance as
the
well within.
class memory.
Yes.
Class memory, yeah.
What else?
And with the class name, we can call the static variable.
Hmm. Hmm.
And for instance, we can call with creating the object.
Hmm. What
So
And
else?
class static
they
is like a
shared
class loader.
they shared the common memory for the
Correct.
method.
Correct. Correct. So for the variable, this is the, I mean, appropriate answer. Okay. What if you are having any static variable? Okay. So that particular variable is related to your class rather than instance. Okay, instance means object. So object, it is not related to your object. It is not related to your object. Okay, so if that particular variable will get memory or it will get initialized, and it will stored in your class memory. It will stored in your class memory, and that particular variable will not reinitialize. Sorry, it will reinitialize. But whenever you are creating objects, so let's say you are creating different objects, right? So in that case, it is not going to reinitialize again and again and again. So that we have seen earlier, right? So just go through that particular recording so that you will get again clear idea. All right. So this particular variable is as well static here, and final means you cannot modify the value of this particular variable. Okay. So this is the point number what? The point number 3. Point number 3. Every variable inside the interface is by default public, static, and final. Okay, and it must be initialized at the time of declaration. So we have done that. Okay, at the time of declaration, we have initialized the variable. So this particular 3 words or this particular 3 keywords, no need to mention. By default, it will take care. Okay. Now fourth point is saying it is not possible to create the constructor. So for example, I am trying to create the constructor of this particular interface. Okay, so how to create the constructor? Anyone remember how to create the
But
constructor?
class name,
Okay,
Same
Method
yeah,
with the
name.
method
Yeah.
name.
right. So this is something. Can I say like this is the constructor? Yeah, this is the constructor,
Yes.
right? But see, it's giving me error. Okay, so interface cannot have the constructor. Interface cannot have the constructor. So this particular adding the constructor is not possible here. Adding the constructor is not possible here. Okay, so just we are talking about the constructor. Okay, so just I have one question, right? So can I have return type for this constructor? Can I add the return type here?
Actually,
No, it will be considered as a common method.
Right. So
constructor
interface
is
for the
not
constructor,
not
you do not
yeah.
provide the interface as well. Sorry, you do not provide the return type as well.
Yes, yes.
For the constructor, you do not provide the return type. So again, it is a concept of constructor, right? So I'll suggest, I mean, constructor is also important topic, right? So you should, I mean, have the clear idea about how to create the constructor and all, right? Okay, so what we see here, it is not possible to create the constructor, right? And fourth point is saying like, it's not possible to create the object of, your interface. It is not allowing you to create the object of interface. So for example here, right? So if I'm saying like, in this particular class, suppose inside the M method, I want to create the object of, let's say A class, right? So how I'm going to create the object of A class? So I'm going to say mostly A of A is equal to new A. Okay, so this is how we can create the object, right? But it will give me the error. Okay, what error it is giving? Cannot instantiate the type A. So type A, you are not allowed to create the instance. Why? Because see, this is the interface, and for the interface, we cannot create the object. Okay, so it's not allowing to create the object. Yeah, but definitely you can create the variable of interface. So like this. Okay, so this is allowed. This is the variable. This is not an object. We are creating the reference variable of interface. This is allowed. Creating the interface variable, it's allowed. Okay, but object creation is not possible. Object creation is not possible. Okay, so
Under the main method also not possible, Ajay.
under the main, anywhere you go, anywhere it's not possible to you create the object of interface. Go to the main method, go to the X method, go to the Y method, any method, not
Okay.
possible to create the object. Okay, clear? Clear for
Uh,
everyone or not?
Yes.
yes, sir. Sir, you have create that you call the static variable in the test
Mm-hmm.
class. So you
Mm-hmm.
write the capital A dot small a.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we write this in the class test because it is not implement that interface
Uh,
in the test class. That's why it is giving error earlier.
sorry. What is your question?
Sir, if you can open the test.java below B,
Test.java. Okay, here.
yes, yes. So
Yeah.
you write the A dot capital A dot A. So this
A dot A here,
test
right?
class not implements the A interface. So how can this is called uh, static
that
variable?
you want to say that the implement keyword before the test, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So
Mm,
you are saying like, this particular test class is not implementing the A,
yes, sir.
right? Right.
You
So
can
that,
write the B dot child class so that you
no.
can
That
call.
that's fine. Okay. So A is what? A is one interface. A is one interface. Correct. So, and which type of interface is? What is the access modifier for this particular interface? Public access modifier. So this particular interface is accessible publicly, right? So tomorrow, if I'm creating one class, so for example, my class name is like, let's say, um, what I can say, like, Okay, so for example, I'm
Class.
creating the class bank. Okay, so I'm creating this particular class bank. Okay, now see, this particular bank is, let's say, publicly accessible, right? So public is access modifier there, right? And tomorrow if I want to go to the test, right, and I want to create the variable of this particular class, right, or inside this particular method I want to create the variable. How I can create? So I can say bank B, and which is completely fine, which is completely fine, because this particular class is accessible publicly. So I'm just creating the variable of that particular class. Okay. Similarly, that particular interface, this particular interface is accessible publicly. Publicly. So access modifier we will learn. Okay, don't worry about that. Okay, but we are what exactly we are doing? We are saying one class, one interface is there. Okay, one interface is there, and in that particular interface, we are having one variable A. One variable, sorry, in this interface, we are having one variable A. Now, what I'm simply saying here, just why I'm saying like here, okay, system.out.println a.a. A.a means in this particular interface A, there is one variable A is available here, right? But this particular variable is by default static variable. By default static variable, right? So static variable we can access with the help of class name only. And this is the class name here. This is actually interface, but consider this is the class name, right? So A is the class name. Then I can say without creating the object here inside this particular method, I can say A dot A, and it will not give me error. Why? Because A is the publicly accessible, and in that I'm saying A dot A. Okay, and just because of this particular A is static variable, I can access with the help of this particular A. That is the interface name. Clear?
Yes, sir. Sir, if we write a b dot a, can we access this variable
Okay, B is
through
here,
the
right?
child? Yes,
B is
we
here, right?
implement that interface. So in the test class,
Okay, so
uh,
that is a good question. Okay, in test class, okay, in test class, if I say B dot A, which is accessible, right? How? Because B is the child class of A. B is the child class of A. So by default, all the properties and behavior is accessible here. By
sir,
default, all the properties
if we
and
make
behavior
that if we make that class B as a private, so through that can we access
which one?
instead of class B, we make that a private, and
Class B is a
that
private
implement
class, right?
yes, and implement that interface. So
So
can
I
we
think
access this?
private class is not applicable. Okay, it's you're not allowed to create the private class. Okay, you can have public class, you can have protected class, you can have default class, but private class will not allow you. Okay, it's not allowed to create the private class. Only
Or
inner class you
or
can create the private class. Okay, so what I will suggest, you can try it your own. So you will get, I mean, it will increase your understanding. Okay, I can try, okay, whatever scenario you will tell, okay, but just try it by your own, okay, and let come to me, okay, I'm doing this, I'm not able to do this, okay, I'm doing that, I'm not able to do that, right? So just discuss with me, okay, but answer to your question, what you're trying to say, okay, you're trying to say here, okay, if I make this particular class B as a private class, right? So in that case, straightforward answer is that you're not allowed to access this particular B here, okay, or that particular B anywhere. Okay, if it is private, how you can access, right? Private is not accessible.
yes,
Private is accessible within the class only.
but we
And
can
class,
access default. Yes,
sorry,
we can create the object through default if it is default access
yeah,
specified.
yeah. Default, see, we will cover the, I mean, access modifier. Then you will this particular doubt you will get clear. Okay, we have to understand first of all access modifier. Right, so access modifier I will cover for you. and then you'll not confuse about where I can access the public, where I can access, because see, when I'm saying public, it is accessible to publicly. When I'm saying like default, then it is accessible within the package, so this is abstraction is one package, so within that package you can access the default variable. So when I'm saying the protected, right, so it is accessible within the package, as well as you can access that particular variable in child classes. So for example, my child classes is available inside this particular package. So abstraction, this is the abstraction, and this is the hierarchical inheritance, right? So if I'm trying to access the abstract, here one class is available in this particular package, and I'm trying to access in here, right? So you can easily access that if it is your class is protected, or your access or your members are protected. All right, so that is different
Yes.
topic, so we'll not
And
mix this, otherwise people will get confused, right? So don't
yes.
don't mix it, just keep it separate, right? So when you're talking about the interface, you have to remember these 4 points first. Okay, I think 5 points. All right, so first point is, if you are having interface, and in that interface if you are creating the methods, so all the methods is by default public and abstract. Okay, second point, in that particular interface, if you are having some child class for that particular interface, so in that particular child class we have to implement all the methods which is not implemented in interface. So unimplemented method, you have to provide the implementation. What is mean by providing the implementation? That means you have to provide the body, you have to provide the actually your logic, you have to
Sir,
provide the actual logic, right?
indirectly we can say that like we can use the extend keyword. Instead of that, we can use the implement keyword. Here.
Implement keyword, yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct, right? Now third point is that if you are having variable in interface, so compulsory you have to initialize that particular variable. Apart from that, by default there are some keywords will apply for that particular variable. Those are static, final, public, static, and final. Public and static, final. So your interface variable is by default public and final. Public, static, and final. Right. Point number 3 is saying, sorry, point number 4 is saying that it is not possible to create the constructor, and point number 5 is saying it is not possible to create the object of interface. So whenever you see the interface and someone asks you, create the object of this particular interface, so it's not possible. Whenever you see the interface and someone asks you, add the constructor in this particular interface, so interviewer will try to confuse you. Okay, if I'm having interface in this particular if I'm having interface, and in that interface I'm creating the constructor, now I'm creating the child constructor object. All right, so what is the output? So here two mistakes he has made. So first one is interface you cannot have constructor, and second one, interface you cannot create the object. So you have to remember like this. Okay, clear these 5 points? Anyone having any confusion?
Hello, sir. Just one point if you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Public static is final. It is only for variable and not for the method, right?
Right, so method is what I said in point number 1. Method is by default public and abstract. So in case of method, you have to understand only, you have to remember only 2 points. Okay, so method is by default public and abstract. Okay, but when it comes to the variable, so your variable is by default public, static, and final. Variable is public, static, final, but method is by default public and abstract. So method is not static here. Remember, method is not final here. Okay, so method is by default public and abstract, and variable is by default public, static, and final. Clear?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, this is the core topics for the interface. Okay, but our interface movie is not end here, right? So in that there are two things which is added after Java 8. Okay, there are two things that is added after the Java 8. What is the Java 8? Java 8 is the version of the Java. Okay, 1.8. 1.8 is the version of the Java, and that was the major release of the Java. Okay, in that what they did, they have added two things. Okay, so in constructor we can have some methods which is having body. Okay, now this is confusion, right? So uh, till this particular point, what I'm saying, in interface you can have methods which is not having body, right? So all the methods are by default abstract. Now you are saying, like, you can have some methods, okay, which can have body. Okay, so see, in Java 8 onwards, they have added these two topics. Okay, so first one is the default method. So interface, we can have you interface, you can add the default method. How many default method you can add? You can add n number of methods. There is no restrictions. Okay, and second one is the static method. Okay, again, this particular static method will be having body. You can have body for this particular static method as well. Okay, so how many static method you can add? You can add n number of static method. No issue. Okay, now from this, because of this concept, we can say in interface as well, we can have few methods which is having body. We can have few methods which is having body. Okay, few means how many methods? There is no restrictions. Okay, but someone asks you tomorrow, can I have method in interface which is having body? Okay, and or can I have methods with the body in interface? So in that case, you should not say no. Your answer should be, for the default method and for the static method, you can have the body inside the interface. Even it is inside the interface, you can have body for those method. You can have body for those method.
Ajay, if it is having the body, then it is not an abstract method. It's like normal method, isn't it?
It's normal method. Exactly. That's perfectly correct. Okay. So these particular two methods we can have in interface which is having body. Okay. Now let's try to
Sir,
understand this.
for static method, it is compulsory that is a default method, default access specifier.
Sorry.
Or other, sir,
So
for static method in interface, if we define, then it should be a default method.
your
If we are
question,
writing, my question is,
if
sir, if we are defining the body of a method and which is static,
Mhm.
then that is that is mandatory, that is the default method, or some
No, no, no,
other
no, no, no. Don't get
specifier.
confused. Okay. So this default method is different thing. Okay. And this static method is different thing. So these are the two different concepts. Okay. Don't mix it. Okay. So what is meant by default method? So first I will cover the default method. Okay. So what is meant by default method? Simple. Okay. So what we need to do? We need to go to the interface. Okay. For example, this is the interface. And here I want to add some default method. Okay. So how to add the default method? So I have to say default. Okay, and let's say method return type. Okay, and let's say I'm saying, like, m3, or I will say the, or let's say m3 is fine. Okay, so I'm saying m3 is my default method. Okay, now here you cannot say, like, I'm not having I will keep this as an unimplemented. Okay, so you have to provide the implementation here itself if it is default. Okay, so I'll say system.out.3 println, and this is default m3 m3 method. This is default m3 method. Okay, so I can say this is the default m3 method. So in interface you can have default method as well. Default method as well. So what is special about this default method? So for this default method, you can provide the body. For this default method, you can provide the body. Right. So interviewer can ask you, okay, is it possible to in interface we can have some methods and which is having body? So your answer should be the yes. For the default method, you can have body. Okay. Similarly, how we are having default method, you can have the static method as well. Okay. So I can say static. So let's say void m4. Okay. And as well here as well, I can have one method which is static method, and for that particular static method, I can have body. Okay. So I will say this is static m4. Okay. So this is static m4. Okay. So two things have to remember here. Okay, so one is default method, you can have body. Static method, you can have body. Rest of the all method, you cannot have body. So for example, I'm having some instance method. So what is mean by instance method? We have covered earlier, right? What is mean by instance method?
The normal
What is
method,
mean by instance method?
the
The
method
method
which
which
is
is not
created with
static, that is the instance
that,
method, right?
yeah,
Which is not having
mhm,
static keyword.
static keyword.
Right. So for example, I'm having some instance method. Okay, so for example, I'm saying M5 is my instance method. M5 is my instance method, right? And for this method, I am providing the body. I'm providing the body, all right? So in that case, immediately I'm getting one error. What error I'm getting? Abstract method do not specify the body. So as if you see, by default, it's considering this particular method as abstract method, right? By default, it's considering this method as abstract method. So it will not allow me to have body, right? So for instance method, you cannot provide the body. But yes, if your method is a default, you can provide the body. If your method is a static, you can provide the body, right? Now see,
Sir, what is a access specifier of M4 method? It is what? M4
So,
is
sorry,
a public
yeah,
method.
you can give
M4.
anything. Okay, you can say like, um,
No, no. I'm asking. We are not writing any access specifier in line number 14.
line number 14, right?
Yes.
So here by default, it's a default access modifier.
so Ajay, I have a question that how can we override that one, that static? We cannot override the static method. So,
Right, right, right. So next rule is saying like, this particular method, you have to, you do not override. Okay, so this method is as it is. Okay,
oh,
so this method you don't have to override, but this method you can override.
yeah,
Okay,
that one.
so see, so see, uh, first of all, uh, I just want to understand. Okay, everyone is clear. Okay, so interface, if you are having default body is default method, that particular method can have body, correct? And if you interface, if you are having static method, that particular static method as well, you can provide the body, right? So these 2 points is clear for everyone.
Yes, Ajay.
Okay,
Yes.
rest of the method will not
Yes.
have body. Rest of the method will not have body. All right. Now try. Let's understand where exactly we can use the interface. Okay, so interface you can use the in two situation. Okay, so first situation is yesterday we have seen one situation, right? So where abstract method is used, right? So I'm saying like I have I have some requirement and I don't know the implementation detail. I don't know the implementation detail. All right, or we can say I have requirement, but I don't know the, I mean I'm having partial implementation is there. So in that case we can use the abstraction. So abstraction where exactly you use. So for example, these two methods, this method I'm having implementation detail, right? So for this method I'm having implementation detail. I know the how to delete method will work, but I don't know about this particular method. Client itself is not knowing about this particular thing, right? So in that case, I told you, right, you should go for the abstract class because you don't know, I mean, how to implement this particular, how these two methods is having implementation, right? So in that case, you are going with the this particular class, right? In similarly, if you are having requirement details, so for example, I got the requirement from the client that you have to build one application. So let's say HR management application. So in that application, you are going to add the user, you can going to delete the user, you're going to modify the user, you can going to view the user. But if I ask, technical implementation for these methods, so he will say simply, I need to work on that. I don't know how many fields will be there, which are the fields will be there, which fields needs to add while adding the user, right? So in that case, I got, at least requirement, right? So there could be one user class, and in that, these are the different functionality: add user, edit user, delete user. So I will create interface, and in that interface I will add all these methods, right? And I will not provide the body because I don't know implementation detail, right? So in that case, your interface option is the best choice. Using interface is the best choice. Okay, this is the first case where we can use the interface. Okay, second one is the, if you want to add one contract. Okay, so what kind of contract? So for example, I'm adding one contract where I'm giving some methods. Okay, so for example, I'm having one browser class. Okay, so let's say browser class is there. Okay, and for that browser class, I want to add one method. Okay, so let's say launch browser, or maybe I enter URL, refresh. These are the browser functionality, right? So take any browser. These are the functionalities are there. So these are the generic functionalities are there, right? So I'm adding the browser contract. In that, all the generics method I will add there. Okay, which are the generics method for the browser? So let's say you can refresh the browser. Let's say you can you can forward the browser, you can backward the browser, you can refresh the browser. What else you can enter the enter the URL into the browser, right? So these are the generic functionality. So what I want, okay, so I will create the one generic class, let's say browser, or generic interface, let's say browser. In that, I will add all these particular methods, right? But those method will not have any body because those are abstract method, right? Because I'm using interface, right? But tomorrow, let's say Firefox come. Tomorrow, let's say Chrome come, right? So those browsers needs to implement whom? Our browser class, our browser interface. Those class needs to implement our browser interface, so that whatever methods I have mentioned, okay, those methods, for those methods, that particular browser has to provide the implementation, their own implementation. So how to enter the URL in, let's say, Chrome. Let's say how to launch the Chrome browser, how to launch the, how to refresh the Chrome, how to forward the Chrome, how to backward. So those are method available inside the Chrome. Why? Because I have forcefully mentioned those method into the browser interface. Now browser interface is implementing, so Chrome is implementing the browser interface. So all these methods should be available in Chrome class. All right. Now, for example, I'm having Firefox class, right? So now Firefox class is implementing again. So this is the second child of, your browser class, that is the
Browser class.
Firefox, right? So all the methods available in the browser class, those needs to have in this particular Firefox class as well. So this is mandatory for Firefox as well. Why? Because Firefox is implementing the whom? Browser class. So it's mandatory for this particular. So these kind of contracts as well you can add if you want. Clear this one?
Yes, sir, but why we are creating the static method in that browser class means if we can't
Right,
override that one.
right.
So I have that
Now
question.
let's, yeah, but you all clear about these two situation where exactly we have to use the interface.
Yeah,
I want to hear from
I agree.
everyone.
Yes, Ajay.
Okay. Shivani,
Yes,
Harshada
Ajay,
is
I'm
saying
listening.
clear. Vajra is saying clear. Okay. Mrunal, or it's confusing because you join in between, right? So that might be chances that you are not getting this particular topic, and that's completely fine, right? But you have to tell me, okay, if you are not getting this particular topic.
We are getting
Mrunal?
Ajay.
Okay, fine. Okay, perfect. Okay, now, so first question maybe came in mind. Okay, when I should have this particular method, that is the that is our uh, which method? Default method, right? So I missed that particular. I should be here, right? So when I should have this particular default method. So this is the first question. Why should I have default method? So default means, let's go to the again that particular browser example. So in all the browser, there should be some common functionality. In all the browser, there should be the some common functionality. So let's say what is the common functionality? So let's assume the about us about us section, or maybe let's say any different thing, like let's say for example refresh is same for everyone, right? Or maybe some default functionality I want to add for all the classes. So let's say three classes are there, and for the all the three classes I want to add some default things. I want to add some default things, right? So you can add those default things inside the default method. Okay, but it's not necessary every browser is having default things same. Okay, so tomorrow it might be chances some browser is saying like, you have added this particular default method like this, but I want to change, do the some modification in that, right? So in that case, what you are going to do, you are going to override that particular method. So which is the method? So for example m3, right? So I'm going to say, let's say void m3, right? What is error? Cannot reduce the scope. So this default method is as well public, I think. Okay, so this default method is by default public. Okay, so it's saying it should be public now. Okay, so all the interface methods are by default public. Okay, so this method is as well public, right? So I'm getting override symbol here. But tomorrow, if I want to, do the modification in this particular method. So for example, which method I want to do the modification? So for example, this particular default method I want to do some modification. Now I can do it. How I can do it? I can say this is m3 in child class, let's say B, child class B. So this is how I can override that particular method. So what I'm saying, so for each and every browser class, there might be some default functionality available. So default means which is applicable as it is, right? Which is applicable as it is. So that's that all those things I can mention in default things. All those things I can mention into the default things. Okay, all those things I can mention into the default thing. But tomorrow, if I want, I can make the changes. Okay, but default is applicable for each and everyone, right? So I'm saying like, I will implement, or I will add some default functions here. I will add some default functionality. Okay, so which is applicable for everyone. Okay, but tomorrow if it's not applicable for someone, you can change it. You can change it, and that is completely flexible. You can change, or you can keep as it is. If it is applicable as it is, you can keep as it is. If you want to do the modification, in that case you can override. Okay, so like how I am overriding here, you can override if you want to modification in child class, right? So this is about your default method. So default method means, so in default method you are going to write the code which is applicable for all your child classes. So let's say we are, in our case we are having three child, Chrome, Firefox and Edge. So whatever the things is applicable for all these three browser, those functions we are going to add in the what default method. Okay, so tomorrow Chrome is having some different implementation for this M3, right? So we can say like, add it differently. Okay, so in that case we have to override it and you have to change the behavior, right? But what about the static? So static means it is a not changeable, right? So what I'm saying, whatever I have saying I'm saying here, whatever I'm saying here, this particular thing should be the as it is. So child should not change it. So child should not change it. It is not allowed to change the child, right? So this particular method I cannot override. That means I cannot modify this particular method. Whatever I'm giving here, that is should applicable. It's not like, if it is applicable or if it is not applicable, then you can override, right? It should be applicable. So those method only you are going to add as a static method. Only those method you are going to add as a static method. So let's take the example. So let's say, for example, in case of bank, right? So our let's say we are having different banks. So which are those? So let's say IDFC bank is there. Let's say SBI bank is there. HDFC bank is there, and all the banks is having one parent bank, which is that RBI bank, right?
RBI.
RBI is the parent bank of all the banks, right? So in that case, let's say RBI is having one rule, which should be, I mean, as it is applicable for all the, I mean, child bank, which should be applicable as it is for this particular child bank, right? But definitely RBI will say, like, let's say, I'm having some deposit method, I'm having some withdrawal method, that should be fine. Okay, you can, I mean, modify as per your company policy, as per your bank policy, right? But there are some strict rule. Let's say, for example, um, RBI have, like, let's say, circular, for example, and they're saying, like, the every bank account should have at least 1,000 rupees minimum balance. Okay, so this is the rule from the RBI, right? For example. Okay, assume that I'm not sure what is the rule. Okay, but assume that RBI is having strict rule that every bank should have 1,000 rupees mandatory as a minimum balance. Minimum balance, right? Every account, sorry, not bank. Every account is having, you should have 1,000 rupees minimum, right? So in that case, that particular account balance or minimum account balance, what I can do, I can make that particular static. So that is not changing as per your bank. So let's say tomorrow you are having different child banks, right? But that should not be changed as per your child, and child should not be allowed to change that, right? So RBI is saying, like, 1,000 rupees, right? So 1,000 rupees should be the applicable for each and everyone, right? So you can make those particular method which should not be allowed to change for the child. So those method you can make as a static. Now this is clear or still confusion?
No, actually, I'm clear.
Okay. Okay. What about others?
Yes, Ajay, I am also clear.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm clear as well.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
sir.
Okay, so now this is about the your interface. So now we have covered everything. Okay, so apart from this, no one going to ask any different question from the interview, from the interface, in case of interface. But guys, remember, all these questions will ask. Okay, so you have to prepare everything. Okay, it's not like that, only first 4 point is important, 5 points. Someone going to ask you, okay, is it possible to have the method for the interface methods? It is possible, right? So all the methods of interface is by default which access modifier? It is public access modifier, right? What about the variable? It is possible to have variable without initialization? It's not possible, right? So you have to remember all these points. Okay, then you can answer at the time of interview, right? Okay, now one and
Sir,
last concept. Yeah.
in the line number 14, we can write default. If we write default static void M4, then or not writing, it is the same, right? Same thing.
Default, I think it is not allowed, but default is again access modifier, right? So in that case, I think it will take the default access modifier. So see, this is not allowing.
So
What it
if we
is
are
saying,
not,
it's abstract default or static is permitted. So default static is not permitted. It's not
okay.
permitted.
So what is the access modifier right now? I mean, what
Public,
is
public, public. Everyone is having public access modifier.
by default M4 is public. Okay.
M4 is public. Yes. So every method is by default public.
Okay, sir. Fine.
So there is no confusion about method. Every method is public method. Okay, here.
Yes.
Okay. Now see, now this particular method is static. So I can call this particular method wherever I want. How? By using class name. No need to create the object. I can simply using this A, I can call this particular method. Which one? M4 method. But other method, so this particular default method, I should not call. Okay, I will call this, I should call this particular method with the help of child class object. Okay, so this method I'm going to call with the help of child class object. So this method I can call with the help of what?
Class.
With the help of
Okay.
class name only.
Mm,
Okay, so
yeah.
let's try this as well. So for example, this particular test class, I'm creating public static void main, and I'll say string args, string args here, right? So now I'll say system.out.println, or maybe uh, I want to print that particular M4 method, right? So I will say a dot M4 cc. I can able to call that. Okay, so if I run this, so it will give the message. What message? Whatever the message I have mentioned there, it will print that particular, it will give that particular message. So this is the static M4 method, right? So that method I'm getting here, but I will not able to call the default method, right? So if I say here, only this option is shown here, right? A is your static variable, so that's the reason I am able to access, and M4 is as well static method, so I can access it, right? So here, no need to create the object or no need to have child class. Even in that case as well, I can call that particular method. Okay, but rest of the all the methods, what we need to do, you should compulsory have one child class. Okay, and you can create the object of this particular child class. Now in this case, child class is a B, so you have to create the child class object, that is the B class object, right? So I will say here, I'll say here, okay, B of B is equal to new B, right? And then B dot, now if you see, I can able to access M,
M1,
B dot M2,
M, M3.
B dot M3, but M4 is not accessible, right? Okay, so what is the error? Because see, this method is not overridden. So this particular B class is not aware of this M4 method. So
Because it's
M4
a
strictly
static.
you have to access like this. Yeah, because this is static. Static method you cannot override, right? And static method as well, it's not inherit. Okay, so now if you see this particular method, I should access like this. Okay, now if I run, it will print the output. Okay, so all the methods are executing successfully. Perfectly fine. Right. So first three method you have to access with the help of child class. This method you have to access with the help of class A. Sorry, interface A. Clear this one? Right. Simple. We are creating the child class object, and with the help of child class object, we are accessing those method. Okay. So out of here, so let's say this M1, sorry, M and M2 method hai, M and M2. Right. So those methods are available in child itself because we have provided the implementation in child, these two methods. Okay, so this particular method is a default method, right? So default method, how we can access, because this is available inside the interface, and for the interface you cannot create the object, right? So this method you can access with the help of child class object. With the help of child class object, I can access that default method. So this particular method is the default method. default method. And these two methods, actually I have implemented these two methods inside the what? Inside the B class. So through the B class, I can easily access B class object. Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so there is, I mean, for the interface, one more topic is remaining, that is the functional interface. And this is also important from the interview point of view. So that's the reason I want to cover this particular topic as well, but not today. And then last topic on interface, that is the comparison between abstract class and interface. This is also very important from the interview point of view. Okay, so I think that's it for today's session. So we will meet tomorrow for the functional interfaces. Okay. What is the time? 11, right? Okay. So we'll stop here. Okay. Anyone is having any question? You can ask. Okay. Otherwise, we can close the call.
Hello, Ajay.
Yes.
Can you please stay there for 5 minutes?
Yeah. Shall I stop the recording?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. If you are not